Recording in progress.
Welcome, everyone. I call the July 12th, 2022 special City Council meeting to order. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we move on to the agenda items, I'd like to acknowledge our new hybrid meeting format. The City of Bothell is now providing the option of attending council meetings remotely or in person. Public comment will be allowed both in writing or verbally. Verbal comments may be taken either in person or remotely. Sign-up sheets were provided online by the City Clerk's office via link from the agenda. The video of this meeting will be streamed live as well as recorded and available for later viewing on the city's YouTube channel. A call-in number was provided on the meeting agenda for members of the public who wish to call in by phone to listen live to the meeting. If you have called in, we ask that you mute your device so as not to interfere with the meeting. If a participant fails to mute their connection and causes a disruption to the meeting, the connection will be terminated. For our phone-in callers, during staff presentations, staff will make every effort to specify which materials they are referencing so everyone can follow along. Looks like all council members are present in person. Next, I would like to reiterate some meeting guidelines. For all remote meeting attendees, please speak clearly and pause frequently. State your name each time before speaking. Mute your microphone when not speaking. And we don't have any council attending remotely, so the first item on the agenda is meeting agenda approval. Are there any changes to tonight's agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to visitor comment. The city has accepted visitor comment in writing as well as accepted sign-up sheets for those who wish to speak at tonight's meeting. Written comments submitted to the city clerk no later than 3 p.m. today were forwarded to all city council members and are part of the record. City clerk, do we have visitor comment sign-ups?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, we do. We have received 3 written comments which have been submitted to council and will be made record for the evening. And the first one received was were from Cameron Chapman, who wrote regarding formal council members. The second we received is from Kat Antes Tadros, who wrote regarding city council vacant position vote. And third, we have Jeremy Tadros, who wrote regarding the city council vacant position vote. And we also have one request for a live comment, and that is with Gerald Swanson, who should be in the room. Gerald, if you'd like to turn on your camera and mic.
Yes, I'm here.
Great, Jerry, you have 3 minutes to speak.
All right. So again, I've met with several of you on occasion. I've spoken previously. Good evening, and I'm pleased to be able to speak again. I'm speaking on the issue of rerouting Main Street for bus traffic as a way of ensuring safety and security of the members of the Boulevard Place senior community. 300 people approximately residing in this community, one of whom, unfortunately, on Sunday fell at the curb on 183rd Street, is now hospitalized and does not have a good prognosis. And we are very concerned about that individual and about our own safety. We think that you portray an inability to affect bus routes in your comments, but in fact, you have affected bus routes previously. You shut down one block of Main Street back at the height of the coronavirus in order to have outdoor dining available. That street remains shut down by public acclaim, and buses are not traveling on that section of Main Street. They're only traveling on one block of Main Street, the block that our building fronts on. There are very acceptable alternate routes. We are trying to communicate with King County Council, Metro Council, and Sound Transit Council, but could certainly be aided in that by you folks or by the city manager, communicating the strong interest on your part in providing a route that works safely for the 300 residents of this elderly community. I just want to keep that issue in your awareness and in front of you, and appreciate your response when we get it. I appreciate the mayor and the new city manager came and viewed the situation about a week and a half ago. We invite other council members to come by, take a look at our situation, talk with us. It's a situation that if it lasts for another 2 years, there will probably be many more tragedies involved. Thank you very much and good evening.
Thank you. If there's anyone in the audience who wishes to speak, please raise your hand. Come on up, sir. If you'd like to turn on your microphone, state your name and you have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, Council, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name's Hugh Moog. I've been proud to live at 11100 Northeast 174th Street here in Bothell for almost 3 decades now. During all of that time, I've been a professional firefighter for the city of Bothell. Actually was the first in company officer on the call that Gerald was talking about the other day. For all that time, I've known Tom Agnew. He was a fixture in emergency medicine, the best instructor I've ever known. He has taught almost the whole Bothell Fire Department how to be professional EMTs, and skill he learned as a dust-off medic in Vietnam. I also knew him as a Bothell City Council member for over a decade. He is tested by the voters of Bothell, and he has never lost an election here in Bothell. He's chaired numerous regional committees and was a great asset to Bothell. He asked me for his support when he decided to rejoin the dais, if that's at all possible, and I believe that he's earned that. Even on the issues where we found ourselves arguing different positions, he always listens. He always gave you his full attention, and usually one of his signature smiles. I thought I was going to get one there, but maybe not. I believe this is the essence of being an elected official, an essence that you have all demonstrated with me in the past, and I appreciate that very much. It's my sincere hope that you give Tom Agnew the opportunity to reseat on this dais and continue his work for the citizens of Bothell. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I see in the virtual world, we have a number of attendees that are there, so I wanted to make sure if there's anybody in the attendee group that's watching the meeting, if you'd like to speak in public comment, please use the raise hand feature. And I don't see anyone, so that wraps it up.
Thank you, Clerk. All right, moving on to agenda item number 3, interviews and appointments for City Council position number 6. And the first person to get interviewed is Tom Agnew.
Mr. Mayor, before we get started, can I have a moment of personal privilege?
Sure.
Yes, thank you. As we embark on this review of applicants that come before us today to sit beside us, I first and foremost want to thank all the council members for putting forward the questions. I think the questions are a true statement of who we are and what we're trying to get out of the candidates to have a better understanding of who's going to serve with us. So first and foremost, I want to say thank you for that. There's a couple questions that are in the question packet that we're going to be asking today that kind of lead me to believe they're more statements or opinions, and I would like to see if there's any support for taking a look at what we're going to say. We have not had an opportunity to review those together as a council. So I just wanted to see if we wanted to try to do that before we actually interview the candidates. If not, that's okay, but I just wanted to take the opportunity, since we have not officially had an opportunity to review the questions that we're going to be asking as a council.
Well, thank you, Councilmember McNeil. I appreciate that. You know, the way that we had this set up is each council member got a chance to ask a question. And nobody got more than one, nobody got less than one, but we all got to ask our question, and I don't feel it would be fair to have those questions worked over or sanitized by the body. Like you said, it's a really good statement of who we are. That's not something I'm interested in entertaining, no. And to Paul, this is this on the agenda since this is the interview section, or should this have been added to the agenda? Is this something we need to have a discussion about, or is this something we can move on from?
I mean, I think it's the council's interview's time, and if the questions which are part of the interview, if again, it's the body of the whole, the majority of the whole can decide to revisit the questions prior to the interview session. That's part. I think it's part of the interview process.
Okay. I'd rather spend time interviewing, and I'm actually going to reword my question a little bit. You'll probably like it better now. Councilmember Zorns?
I just wanted to add that, for some of us, our day job is not writing test questions, and writing questions is a real challenge on making it as neutral as possible, but still going and getting the information that you're looking for. So I recognize that for some of the folks writing questions, writing a good test questions is a real challenge. And so I appreciate that for your question that you're going to do some rewording on that as well. But all good questions, big scope, varied scope, and I'm looking forward to hearing how people answer them.
Perfect. Mr. Agnew?
Good evening, Mayor and council members, and thank you for this opportunity.
I believe, aren't we having them start with a 3-minute why? It's probably in my run of show, isn't it?
So
Nope.
It is section 10.2D of the protocol manual entitled Interview Meeting. Each interview of an applicant candidate shall be no more than 30 minutes in length as follows. The applicant shall present their credentials to the city council, parentheses, 5 minutes.
Perfect. Mr. Agnew?
Well, I don't know about 5 minutes, but thanks again for the opportunity. I've served on this council for for 12 years. And in that time, I've learned valuable things on how to get along with people, how to interact with people, how to listen to people and hear what they're saying. And I think hearing what they're saying is a lot. I threw my hat in the ring when Councilmember Doer resigned. And I threw it for a number of different reasons. I think, and I think one of our main goals is public safety, and police and fire are dear and near to my heart, as they have been for the past 12 years. And I think we're coming close to a crossroads to where we're going to make a decision, probably within the next few years, on which direction we're going to be going. And I'd like to be part of that decision, if at all possible. My wife and I have lived in the city for 42 years. We first moved up by St. Brendan's, and then we moved down to Valhalla, where the statement is, buy in Valhalla, die in Valhalla. So we live there. We love it there. We love the community. I've been going to the same church for 42 years. Our grandkids are here, well, most of the time anyway. They're going to Vacation Bible School right now, and I had a really hard time getting the 3-year-old out. I mean, she was hanging onto the table. She did not want to leave. So if I can help in any way for this city, I would like to do that.
All right, Councilmember Zorns?
All right, you ready?
Sure.
Okay. Tell us about your budget priorities and what that looks like.
Well, as I stated earlier, and I think we stated in our policy manual that we should provide for the health, safety, and general welfare of the citizenry. And that's right out of our policy manual, and I think that's what we need to do. That's what we need to look at first and foremost. We need to have this city be a safe city for everybody to come into. We need to have a safe city for our kids to go to school. And I think that should be one of our main priorities. Now, how we do that is going to be interesting in the next few years, because every little city wants its own fire department, and every little city wants its own police department. But the cost of those services now have just gone up exponentially. When I first started in the fire service 30 years ago, you could buy a fire engine for $200,000. Now you're going to pay 1.4. You could buy a truck company for $750,000. Now you're paying 2.5. And the rest of the costs have gone up exponentially also with the cost of labor. That's changed dramatically over the years. And we need to look at how we're going to do that if we want to do that. But we need to take a serious look at it because our two biggest budget items, if I'm not mistaken, are police and fire. And we really got to take a look at how we're financing them. Are there options to financing them? And look down those roads. You know, and with that, we'll get some wraparound services like the radar program and the social work in the fire service and things along those lines. But that would be my priority, and that would be what I'd like to look at.
All right. What do you think local government can do that can most successfully mitigate climate change?
Well, I bought a Tesla. Does that count? I think what we need to do, and the only avenue that we really have at our disposal, is our codes and ordinances. And if we change our codes and ordinances to make it to where builders can come in and build green, efficient buildings and be supported by the city for doing that. I think that's the biggest revenue that we have. You know, we can all walk the walk and talk the talk. We can ride our bikes as much as we want. But climate change is here. You've seen it from the temperatures that we had last year to the temperatures we're going to have this year. You know, is it going to affect me? No, I'm in the end of my life. But it is going to affect my grandkids. And I care a great deal about that. And I think we need to do everything that we can possibly do to have the least amount of impact.
Unfortunately, the last election cycle included unfounded attacks on some of the members of the current council and characterization of many Bothell residents as being racist, anti-police, and extremists. Against this kind of divisiveness, what specific actions would you take as a council member to promote unity, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and ensure that all Bothell residents feel welcomed in our city, regardless of racial or religious background?
Well, it appears to me there's probably a couple answers to that question. One is negative campaigning. I've never been fond of it. I've ran a number of campaigns. I've never been negative in any of those campaigns, and I don't feel that's the way to go. I'd prefer to take the high road. But some people are going to take the low road. And unfortunately, once you put your name in the hat for any city position, county, or state, you've opened up your life to everyone else. And they're going to say what they want to say, and they're going to do what they want to do. Hopefully, most of it's accurate. If it's not accurate, I don't know what we can do about that. What am I going to do as a council member? You know, Michael Jackson said it pretty well. He said, I'm going to start with the man in the mirror. You know, I've been pretty fortunate in all my life. I was raised an Army brat. So I traveled from fort to fort to fort to fort, and all my friends were different colors and different nationalities, and it's kind of a unique process. And I learned then, as a young person, that I judge people by their character, and not by their color, not by their sexual orientation, but by their character, because that's what we're supposed to do. You know, I just had that conversation with my granddaughter today about that golden rule thing when she was yelling at her mother. You know, treat people like you want to be treated. You know, I wouldn't like it if somebody made a lot of nasty comments that were unfounded about me also. But I think there's two questions there. And the one is politics. And unfortunately, that's part of politics. I think negative campaigns were run against people on this dais and by people on this dais. And we can't change that Because once you say something as a politician, it's out there. And you can't rescind it because you've already said it and people have already made their impression. But I'm going to look at the man in the mirror for my start. You know, like I said, I spent 30 years in the fire service. It didn't matter whether you were white, black, yellow, green, blue, whether you were a man or a woman. Everybody that did the same job got the same pay. Now, that's unique in businesses, unfortunately. My wife ran Airlift Northwest, which is a huge organization here at the end of her career, and she was paid 20% less than a man that would be running it. Why? Because she was a woman. What does that have to do with it? You know, you should be accountable. You should, if you're doing a good job, you should learn from that. You should have people praise you for it, and there shouldn't be a difference. I think we got a long ways to go. You know, I think there's probably a little racism in everybody, unfortunately. You know, I would love for it not to be. You know, I try to get along with everybody. I try to listen to what people say, and I try to hear what they're saying, because some people listen and some people hear. How did that go? You're welcome, sir.
All right, my turn. Similar to many cities in the region, we have a structural budget deficit and a dramatic shortage of housing. How do you see those two issues as related, and what policies would you support to help break that cycle and bring budget sustainability and more housing to Bothell so children who live here now can afford to stay when they grow up?
That's a great question. You know, because I don't know how my kids could afford to live in Bothell, you know, and they make good wages. As far as housing, I think that we have to meet certain needs that are dictated by the state and the county, okay, with the Growth Management Act. And we're trying to meet those needs. I know when I was on the dais, I was a big proponent of cottage housing and little houses that people could get into that weren't as expensive as the big houses that are out there. You know, I don't know if we're ever going to be able to reach that. I mean, it's a lofty goal, and it's an admirable goal. But I'm not sure how we're going to be able to reach that without subsidizing a lot of housing. But I'd like to take it on as a project.
My question is a slight repeat of some previous questions, but hopefully it'll give you some additional time to expand on a couple topics. What do you believe to be the role of municipal government, and how do you plan to balance the wants and needs of the government given the limited budget that we do have to work with?
As I've said earlier, I've worked in medicine most of my life, my adult life, from 1969 to 2015. In medicine, we use a thing called triage. It was created by a Dr. Laurie. He was a physician with the Napoleonic Army. He was so well thought of for treating his soldiers with triage and looking at the worst and treating the worst, and if somebody wasn't going to survive, not treating that person as well. He was so well thought of that when the Napoleon Army was leaving Moscow in that winter, that the soldiers carried him across the frigid water because they didn't want him to get hurt. I think we need that same approach. I think we have to look at things. We have to triage what we can triage. We have to do the best with what we have. Is everybody going to be happy? Absolutely not. But if we can gain a little bit more each time we address these issues, then I think we're achieving our goals.
First, thank you for your service to our country and to the community of Bothell. My question is how would you set aside your personal beliefs, positions, and alliances to work with all council members, city staff, and the community?
Well, as I've stated, I worked for a long time as a paramedic, and as a paramedic, you have a partner. And that partner is your partner for a year. whether you like them or whether you don't like them. They're your partner for a year. But you work with them. And you work with them because you have a goal. And we listen to people and we work with people because our goal should be the same goal. It should be helping the citizens of Bothell achieve some of what they want. And I think we can work with almost anybody if you just listen. Everybody has great ideas. Some get kind of muscled in some of the rhetoric, but we got to listen, we got to work with each other for the goals that we have for this city. And I think we're doing a pretty good job for the most part. You know, the city financially, is it in the best shape? Absolutely not. But I don't think any city's been in the best shape since Tim Hyman wrote an initiative that said you can only increase your taxes 1% per year. Well, that didn't take into consideration cost of living, because cost of living is more than that. So for the past 20 years, most cities have been trying to catch up. You know, we're going to have to come up with some, well, interesting finance, to put it mildly, to attain some of the things that we need to attain. Is it out there? Yeah, it's out there. Can we do it? Yes, we can do it. It's attainable, it's reachable. And I can get along with almost anybody for at least 10 minutes.
All right, so we have a few minutes left in our half an hour. I don't have this in my run of show. I believe there was an email that talked about format, and I don't have that in front of me. Does one of you know kind of next? Are we doing a 10-minute kind of open Q&A?
Yes, an informal question and answer period in which council members may ask and receive answers to miscellaneous questions for 10 minutes.
Perfect. Well, we'll open it up to the council then. Councilmember Aldrich, did you have a question? You did not.
My microphone was on from like a long time ago.
I thought that might be the case, but if I didn't ask, then you'd be like, dude, it's right here. Councilmember Zorns?
Okay, forgive me, Tom. I'm going to ask you to maybe share one of your war stories about having to go and rescue people and the variety of people that you had to go rescue. Because that made an impression on me when you had told that story.
I got a couple of them. One of the probably most impactful one in my life was I was a medic in Vietnam, and we had a night hoist mission. It was a hot LZ, which means we were getting shot at by the bad guys. We had a flare bird flying about 3,500 feet, dropping off flares so we could see the ground. We had a 19-year-old gunshot wound to the back that had spinal injuries. I dropped the basket down. It was a 175-foot hover because the cable's all color-coded. As I was bringing the basket up, I usually had to drop the basket a little bit with the wire and put it into the helicopter, and my crew chief would grab the bucket, and me and the bucket would go inside. Well, as I said, it was a hot LZ. So my crew chief was shooting out his side. So he didn't grab anything, and me and the basket kind of fell out. I had what we called a monkey strap on, so I was dangling just underneath the skids. I got disconnected from a radio. I couldn't tell anybody I was in trouble. I was getting shot at, and it kind of upset me a little bit. And the first thing I thought about was, this looks like a John Wayne movie. Oh my gosh. And then a tracer went by my head, and I got a little angry. So I drew down on the guy, and I shot in the general direction the person was in, but I was on a monkey strap. So I just spun in circles. Now, I'm sure that guy just laughed his butt off at me. Here's this idiot out here shooting at me, just running in circles. For 43 years, I thought the pilot took control of the hoist and brought me up. And it wasn't until a few years ago that I found out it was my crew chief. He looked off the side and he saw me and the guy out, grabbed the control head and brought it up. You know, the patient looked at me and he said, Doc, I thought I lost you. I said, so did I. We got him in the hospital and he did just fine.
Well, I remember you telling a story of that sometimes you would get calls to go in and rescue Viet Cong.
Yeah. One of my first missions, we flew in, radio call sign came in on a radio and they gave us our coordinates. We got to there, we had them pop smoke. We identified the color of the smoke and we went in, and as we're going in, there was a little lady with black pajamas and an AK-47 on her back. And they just wanted us to take their wounded. In dust off, we took all wounded. Didn't matter whether you were Viet Cong, North Vietnamese, Chinese, Australian, Korean, South Vietnamese, American. We took anybody that needed to be treated, and a lot of citizens. So that was one of my first introductions to, they got all our information. They were on our radio frequency, giving our gridded coordinates out. It was an interesting wake-up call.
Councilmember McNeil?
Thank you. Thank you for sharing the stories. My question is leading towards our community. We straddle two counties, King and Snohomish County. And when we serve on the dais up here as council members, we're supposed to support our entire community.
Right.
I asked a question about how will you work with all council members. How will you work with our entire community to ensure that we're treating everybody within our community equally? That's the citizens of our community and business owners. Well, how do you see that you can treat everybody fairly and equitably?
While I was on the dais, I served on the Housing Committee for Snohomish County, so I had a great deal of input and conversation with the Snohomish County officials and got to meet a lot of them and learn from a lot of them. You know, and at some point in time, and it's not going to be in the near future, that Snohomish County is going to be a lot larger than King County as far as our population goes. And they need parks, they need infrastructure, you know, and we need to start addressing that. And the sooner we address it, the better it is financially for us and them.
All right. Thank you for your time, Mr. Agnew.
Thank you, sir.
I believe next up we have Ms. Rodwell. Thank you for coming. And
Thank you for inviting me. And I just want to share with you, I'm having,
yep, hit the little button on the bottom and it'll turn red.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay, so thank you for inviting me. I want you to know that I'm using a phone program called Otter to get a transcript of everything because it's easier for me to follow up that way. And I know this is being recorded anyway, but I'm recording it too, sorry. It is one of my issues.
All right, well, you've got 5 minutes right now, and that's fine. It's getting recorded anyway, and it's all part of the public record.
So Mayor Thompson, one thing I really would appreciate is to have you speak a bit more slowly.
Okay, I can try my best.
Thank you.
I've been trying my whole life, though, so I can't make too many hard, firm promises. You've got, I guess, 5 minutes to just tell us why you're here, why you think you'd be a good council member, and to make your case.
Okay, so I would like to say I think that I represent the newcomers to Bothell, which are really quite a stunning number of diverse people. I'm a senior. There's a great many new seniors living here that weren't here even 3 years ago. There are huge numbers of non-English speaking people in the schools, in the community in general. Bothell, of course, has annexed a lot of space in the last few years and has also experienced a lot of growth. So what I bring to the situation is very wide experience in this country from Massachusetts to Alaska, plus 30 plus years in the Puget Sound region. For instance, I've been a consultant to the Puget Sound Regional Council. I've done a lot of other technical work of various kinds. And I've also served recently on your diversity equity council task force, which I think is a really important issue that the city is pursuing. I'm very glad to see that you're doing that because, believe me, I've experienced some stuff over my career. When I was a new immigrant in Boston, my first job in this country, one of my transportation planning colleagues didn't like something I said in a meeting, and he told me he would get me fired on grounds that I wasn't a citizen, which was a violation of the Civil Rights Act, which luckily someone pointed out to me fairly quickly, but it was a horrible experience. And I think everybody of color, females, have experienced that kind of stuff. So I'm very glad to see that you're doing the DEI work, and I think it has probably a long way to go. In my application, I talked about some of the things I would like to pursue, and I'll just touch on that. One of them is to create a more transit-oriented Bothell. You've got 3 bus companies. Supposedly they do talk to each other, but if you're a newcomer to the bus riding world, it is pretty terrifying trying to figure out where to go, where's the bus stop, what do I need to make my journey. I went in 2018, I think it was, I trained in the Al Gore Climate Reality Program, and I decided I was going to go to Minneapolis for the training by Amtrak. So then I decided, okay, so I've got to get to King Street Station. I'm going to go by bus. Luckily, I allowed myself about 3 hours because it was quite a circus getting the right bus in the right direction because the map wasn't correct and the information was incomplete. So I think there's a lot that the city could do to get the 3 bus agencies to create integrated information, to put something out on the website on how to use buses, how to get your ORCA card, all of that kind of thing. When the bus rapid transit gets going, maybe in that center can be a place to actually get your ORCA card here in Bothell rather than having to go to Linwood, and on and on. There's many more ideas in that vein. And it's important because you've created at least a downtown where parking is very limited. The old days standard of 2 parking spaces per dwelling unit, that's gone. And we're looking at about 0.7 of a parking space per dwelling unit in what's getting built in Bothell now. So that means you're expecting people to be able to walk, use transit, otherwise get around. And the math doesn't add up right now in a great many ways. So I certainly would like to share more about those things. I'd also like to see walkability maps. The city has a great mapping department, and there's lots of parts of the city that are very walkable, but people don't really know where to begin. They don't realize what they can do from their front door in many cases. As I hear about all the issues and read and look at the DEI task force and so on, one of the things I would like Bothell to look at is a language immersion program for newcomers. A lot of people that don't speak very good English, and they never really get a chance to improve it. And so they go through life not managing their jobs very well, not communicating very well with their clients and bosses because their English isn't very good. And I went through that as a newcomer from the UK, and you might think it's the same language. It isn't. There's only about a 70% overlap, but it wasn't nearly as hard for me as it is for people from Asia or South America or other spots on the planet.
All right, Ms. Rodwell, we're at 5 minutes now.
Okay.
So we're going to move on to the council questions. Councilmember Zorns?
Okay, you ready? My question is, tell us about your budget priorities and what that looks like.
So I've been thinking about this a lot because, of course, every city went through some really hard times because of the pandemic and lots of revenue. And I would not make massive changes, but I would want to see some small amount of money tucked away in the budget each time for innovation and investigation of new possibilities. And I just mentioned language immersion. It doesn't have to be expensive because there's tons of retired people that have training in that, and so forth. There's other areas, for instance, the green building thing that's already been mentioned. The city really does need to look at how it's going to match its building codes to what the car companies say they are doing. There are other things such as we read everywhere that now everybody's going to work from home more. Our commercial spaces, our office spaces are going to be half empty. I think the city could help companies work out how to lease or sublease some of that space to bring new jobs into the area, because they're not going to want to commit to as much property as they've had in the past. There are things like that that are small initiatives that could be helpful. And the main focus, as always, should be, does this pencil out? Can this somehow make more revenue for the city than it's going to cost to do? And last on my list, which I'm not sure I've heard much about in Bothell, is earthquake preparedness. Through building codes, through training, we are facing the big one, folks. We're in the window for the big one, a 9 or more. It's going to mean 2 weeks without outside help to most people. And I'd say less than 1% of the population is ready for that. So that's got to be somewhere on the list.
All right. That's 2 minutes. Thank you. We're going to move on to Councilmember Aldrichs.
Hello. What do you think local government can do that can most successfully mitigate climate change?
Well, for one thing, I mentioned the need to build to accommodate electric vehicles. There's a huge amount of money can be saved by getting more solar going. In my observation, this is a sticks and carrot business. You've got developers who want to do things as inexpensively as possible, so that means they've got to have sticks. The carrots are incentives and grant programs that are lying around all over the place that the city can hopefully pin down. There's massive opportunity and there's massive need for the city to do a climate action plan, mimicking other cities in the region that are doing that. There are resources available to help that to happen. And I think it has to be comprehensive. It has to look at every area, transportation, building, and all the other elements of life.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. Hi, Julie. The question is, unfortunately, the last election cycle included unfounded attacks on some of the members of the current council and characterization of many Bothell residents as being racist, anti-police, and extremists. Against this kind of divisiveness, what specific actions would you take as a council member to promote unity, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and ensure that all Bothell residents feel welcomed in our city, regardless of racial or religious background?
And it's a really important issue that's been touched on already, so I won't repeat that. But I think one of the things that when you hear very strident comments in the public arena or social media is, if I were a council member, I'd want to get with that person directly and say, tell me more about what's on your mind. Most of the time, I've discovered that people just want to be heard. And they don't necessarily want anything to change. They just want to be heard and understood, and rather than pushed away. So that's part of it. And then another part is, of course, maintaining and modeling a good pattern of my own, to not be strident, aggressive, whatever, but to be gracious, diplomatic, thoughtful, and really pay attention to people. And I don't know whether Bothell needs to adopt a policy on this kind of thing, but that might be a good public discussion. So I don't know if we can change the climate enough in one little pocket of the US of A, because it's like this everywhere, which is very difficult for all of us, I think. But I believe, as I'm trained as a mediator, and I've spent a lot of time in my career working with public involvement in transportation issues, there are ways to calm things down, and it mostly involves making people feel heard.
All right, it's my turn now. Similar to many cities in the region, we have a structural budget deficit and a dramatic shortage of housing. How do you see those two issues as related, and what policies would you support to help break that cycle and bring budget sustainability and more housing to Bothell so children who live here now can afford to stay when they grow up?
Well, I have spent quite a bit of time on the housing issue. I was the president of the board of a homeless shelter in Olympia where I lived, and looked at the whole spectrum of housing. Bothell housing is pretty expensive when you look at the average, and the new housing going up is even higher. I'm seeing these new townhouses in the $800,000 range. So obviously there has to be a different approach, which includes setting aside some land for housing, asking developers to pay impact fees or to provide a percentage of affordable housing, perhaps even setting aside some land for tiny house developments. I was a founder and first occupant of the initial co-housing project built in this country, modeled after what goes on in Denmark. And that's another model that could be very successful. You see it too in manufactured home parks, where you've got affordable housing, but you've got a little community building where people can get together. That model is a good housing model in a great many ways. And there isn't a lot of room left in Bothell for new construction, but maybe more of a focus on setting aside land where it's possible to do more of that, and also transit-oriented development. So there has to be a balance. We've got a very high average income in Bothell, but we've also got quite a lot of people at the low end of the spectrum, and they need to be able to find housing. So I think it's a many-faceted approach. I would say it's really important to look at best practices in other places and learn from what's already been done, and not to try and reinvent the wheel here. There's lots of good information out there. I guess you can tell I'm a researcher.
Thank you. Councilmember Mankey.
What do you believe to be the role of municipal government, and how do you plan to balance wants versus needs given a limited budget?
I've worked at regional, state, and a little time with the federal government and local government. I have to say, I think local government is the most effective, efficient, and on-the-ball level of government in this country. Small cities do an amazing job of coping with all the things they have to juggle. And I think that many of the residents in a city will deal with increases in fees and taxes if they feel that they are getting good value and if they understand what's going on. So some of it's communication, but I also think it might be worth looking at what's been done many years ago in other places, what's called zero-based budgeting, where you, instead of just taking last year's budget and going, this one needs to go up 5%, this one can stay level, blah, 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 you can wipe the slate clean and look at each line item from scratch and go, do we really need this in this way, or is there another way to do it? And even though that exercise might not become the adopted budget, it might be a worthwhile exercise.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you for coming and putting your name in the ring for this. It's important decision we're going to be making. How would you set aside your personal beliefs, positions, and alliances to work with all council members, city staff, and the community?
Well, I'm going to flip that one on its head a little bit. I come from 400 years of Quakers, and the central precepts of Quakerism is look for that of God in everyone. So what that's saying is everybody has something worthwhile in them. You just have to look for it. Sometimes it's not as apparent as other times. But when you reach out and connect with that person's humanity, you can find common ground, and you can build a friendship, and you can get things done. So I don't think I want to set aside that personal belief. I think that's going with me.
That was a great answer. I really enjoyed that. Thank you. All right, so we're done with the scripted questions. Council members, does anybody have any follow-up questions? Councilmember Zorns?
The international piece of your resume intrigues me. And how do you see Bothell engaging in international interests?
Well, that's an interesting question for a small city that's kind of landlocked. But just as the Fred Hutch area of Seattle became known as a medical center and cancer research center, I think Bothell has the opportunity to brand itself. We've got life sciences, we've got medical appliances, we've got a college. There's a way to have people recognize this is Bothell. I think I said in my material, Woodinville, everybody knows Woodinville stands for wineries. Let's have something more significant than wineries in Bothell, and let's promote the heck out of it so you get the employers that would go on doing those worthwhile things with family wage jobs. Because Bothell is, I think it might be because of so many annexations, nobody quite knows what Bothell is, and that could be changed.
Councilmember McNeil?
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a follow-up question to you. I guess you were part of the PSRC or a consultant for PSRC. So I have a question around the PSRC. What type of consultant were you for them? And then how do you see us connecting North Bothell, Snohomish County portion of Bothell, with the South King County portion of Bothell through transit?
Big question. So I worked for the PSRC on a lot of airport projects. So I know Harvey Field pretty well in Snohomish and some of the other airports in the region. But I also worked on economic impact of, for instance, at SeaTac, the economic impact of so much expansion. But on the transit question, the first place I want to be is just to be able to click on a community transit website in the Bothell area and have the other two have Sound Transit and Metro pop up as links so that I can figure out my whole trip just with one push of the button. Because right now you have to mess around with 3 different websites, and Metro has a good trip planner tool. But the whole thing is not up to date, and it could just be made a whole lot easier. So that's just information, and that would be a starting point.
I have just a quick clarifying question on your answer to my question earlier. You mentioned setting aside land for housing and tiny housing. What did you mean by setting aside?
Well, it's going to wind up being in the comprehensive plan. It's going to have to be zoned for a certain type of housing that might be different than what you have now. I know the comp plan is going to start getting updated pretty soon, so that might be something to flag. There isn't a whole lot of buildable land left, but what might be feasible. There's a project going in right on SR 522 that's going to be affordable housing, so it is doable. And there are other locations in the city where redevelopment may be what happens.
Perfect, thank you. I just wasn't sure if you meant city-owned property or zoning.
No,
Perfect.
I think it's probably any property.
Yeah. All right, well, I don't see any other questions from up here. Ms. Rodwell, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we have Amanda Dodd.
Hello. I have lost my voice after an illness, so I have my tea. Please be patient with me.
We can do that. You've got 5 minutes to tell us why you're here and why you think you should be on council.
Okay. Well, hi, everybody. My name is Amanda Dodd. I put this in my application, but my parents moved to Bothell when I was 5. I did not have a lot of choice in the matter. Before that, we lived with my aunt and uncle because to save up to buy a house, so I was kind of mad about it. But I did decide I liked Bothell for a while. And then when I was a teenager, it was pretty boring. We don't have a lot of teenage activities. I was at the mall or I was reluctantly at school sometimes. But I wanted to live anywhere but here. But I came back because I grew up, I had a family, and I wanted my kid to go through our school system. And there's just a sense of community in Bothell. I still knew a lot of people here. My dad still lived here. So I ended up back in Bothell, and I'm really glad I did. It's been great to not only reconnect with the people that I know that still live here, but also just get to meet the new people that have come in. Bothell has grown so much since we first moved here, so it's been really great. In my day job, I'm a technical account manager at a software company. I always joke that it's kind of like parenting because I tell my clients kind of our best practices around our products. I walk them through following them. If they maybe don't follow what I say the first time, I help them fix it without judgment. So that's a lot of how I parent my kid, is helping him fix stuff without judgment, usually. So thank you.
All right, Councilmember Zorns.
Yeah, that was a real eye-opener for me as a parent, where it was like, you mean I have to tell you more than once for it to make sense? That was probably my biggest learning curve as a parent yeah, and find other ways to say it. I'm feeling really guilty making you talk here.
No, I love to talk, so honestly, it's so quiet trying to save my voice for tonight.
It's worth the hit. Okay, so here's my question. Tell us about your budget priorities and what that looks like.
I think, I feel like my biggest priority is we need more of the recreation in Parks and Recreation. Now, some of that is pandemic related, and I totally understand. Not a lot, I feel like I'm aware of, has changed since I was a teenager with kind of nothing to do in Bothell. We have the Lime scooters now. I'm a big fan. But I wish we could engage more levels of our community more often. I remember coming to a Pros Plan open house and saying we needed something for people like my dad who feel too young to hang out at the senior center and too old to hang out, other places. So he just kind of stays home, and there's only so much Law and Order to watch. So I really think there's some age groups that we could target with recreation that would be amazing. I feel like we're at our best as a community. We can come together in places, play at parks together, and I think I'm going to tangent a little bit to Councilmember McNeil's question, but where I've always lived in the Snohomish County part of Bothell, we have less parks. Sometimes they have different features, different facilities, so it'd be great to see that in more of the city, just so that more people have an opportunity to take advantage of those. I think when our staff has the budget for it, they come up with amazing ideas, so I'd love to get our budget to where we can enable them to come with those ideas and wow us some more.
Councilmember Alders.
I was hanging on your words and taking notes, so ready now. What do you think local government can do that can most successfully mitigate climate change?
I think at a local level, the biggest thing is making it easier for people to take trips that don't involve cars, right? Electric cars are a great start, but if you're adding to congestion, cars that aren't electric are still polluting the environment. I love the scooter program. I love to see bike shares, and I would love to see safe ways to do that. I've been following the Bothell Everett Highway widening because that's my main route from where I live to downtown Bothell, and I never bike that part of Bothell Everett Highway, not by myself, not with my child. It's scary. I remember when I got my bike, my friend who bikes in Bothell said, "Do not take that road," and I was like, psh. Because sometimes I get a little Gryffindor and a little too brave, and I've never done it. I kind of looked at it once from my car, and I was like, you know what, that's actually a pretty good idea. So I go down to 19th, which turns into 100th, I'm pretty sure. King County roads I'm still working on. But we bike that way, or we bike through actually by Sorensen, West Hill, Conifer View down the hill, which is a very fun hill to bike down. But I would love to have that highway route and just more routes to get across the city. The other thing that I will say is growing up here, I don't know if it's a sign of the times or if my parents were a little more lax, but I was taking the bus to the library when I was 11 or 12. And it was one bus from where I lived, right at 4th and 216th, right on the city line to downtown Bothell. And now it's 2 buses. And I did the 2 bus thing on the way home from the 4th of July parade. And it's annoying. It's not efficient. It's a 5-minute drive and well over half an hour to take the bus. And my brother only takes the bus, and I hear about it from him too. So I'd love to see the city kind of step in and sort of push those transit agencies together. Like, we should have one route that covers a lot of the places in our city that need to be connected. So kind of stepping in and just making alternate ways of travel easier, I think, is a big thing. Green buildings are great, but I also think the greenest building is the building that already exists. So as we update our zoning and everything, encouraging people to retrofit, like if you have a giant house and you want to make it a duplex or a triplex, if there's a way to make it easier for people who already have a house instead of building a new one, that's another great way to do that.
Deputy Mayor?
Unfortunately, the last election cycle included unfounded attacks on some of the members of this current council and characterization of many Bothell residents as being racist, anti-police, and extremists. Against this kind of divisiveness, what specific actions would you take as a council member to promote unity, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and ensure that all Bothell residents feel welcomed in our city regardless of racial or religious background?
Thank you. That's a really important question. I know what you're talking about. I am in virtual Bothell a lot at times. And it was pretty horrifying to watch. There were a lot of people that I looked up to that had responses that I couldn't respect. And it was a very divisive time in the community. And I think at the time, the only thing I could think of to do was to take to my platforms that I had available to me, which were, I think, Twitter. I still have a public Facebook post that everybody's free to look at. And talking to my neighbors and my friends in the city and kind of telling them, like, look at who is writing this letter. Are these people that we respect otherwise? Are the things in this letter true? Are these claims defensible in any regard? And I think the most important thing that anyone can do, whether they're elected or not, is to read the letter, understand it, or listen to what people are saying, and then if it's garbage, call it garbage. Don't be silent. Don't be complicit. Say things. Speak up when people are saying things that are horrible like that. We all have that duty to speak up. We need to look at who we're talking to, what we're letting them say in front of us, and if it's inappropriate or wrong, we need to call that out. So I would say that would be something I would try my best to do. I also think it's important to understand that racism is pervasive, and calling it out is one thing. Understanding why people lean into that instead of pushing away from it and helping them learn to push away from it is also important. So I don't want to say that someone who makes a mistake has no value, but keeping a dialogue with them in the aid of helping them understand why the things they're saying are harmful and wrong and hurt people is also important.
Thank you, Commissioner Dodd. The next one's mine. Similar to many, this is a two-part question. Similar to many cities in the region, we have a structural budget deficit and a dramatic shortage of housing. How do you see those two issues as related, and what policies would you support to help break that cycle and bring budget sustainability and more housing to Bothell so children who live here now can afford to stay when they grow up, like you did?
I know, and I don't think I could buy my house right now. I am horrified to note that the condo I bought in 2014 doubled in value when I sold it in 2018. The house I bought in 2018 has now doubled in value, and I could not afford it right now. That's horrible. That's disgusting. Like, I don't know if my child can afford to live here without a lot of help when he grows up. It's not sustainable. We've heard so many people on council talk about this with their grown children, with their kids who are children now. We have so much of the city where only certain types of housing can be built. And I think we need to really look at why that is and who that's serving. And it needs to change. I'm not talking about tearing down neighborhoods and building apartments all over the city, but I do think that if my neighbor wants to build a duplex, it's none of my business. I don't own his house. He should be able to do that. That's another housing unit. We all know, heck, my dad was in a house way too big for him before we moved him in with us. And it was because he didn't really know where he wanted to move. There weren't a lot of smaller houses in Bothell to buy. We need to give people choices. I think I am fairly progressive for the most part. I try not to sign up for things that we can't afford, so I come across as a moderate a lot of the time. But I think one of the areas that I disagree with a lot of my progressive friends is I don't know that we need to regulate what people are doing with their houses as much as we do. We are creating a huge lack of opportunity, and it means that only the houses that are built are what are here, and people can't afford to buy them. The median home price is horrific. So if we built more types of housing that allowed for starter homes, allowed developers to build more interesting projects, I think we would see housing become more affordable. I know the Planning Commission that I'm on has been working on middle housing for you guys for a long time. And I think my biggest wish is just to see some movement. I would love to see the council consider it and like, let's get there. You know, houses aren't going to start to be built like right after we do that. So I feel like we've just been in limbo for a long time, and I'm not blaming it on the commission or staff or anybody, but it's one of the times where the city moves about as slow as the city is supposed to move. But I'm just like, oh my gosh, we need housing right now. So I would just love to see stuff happen.
Thank you. Councilmember Mankey?
What do you believe to be the role of municipal government, and how do you plan to balance wants versus needs given a limited budget?
I think the big thing is it goes back to the mayor's question of, can we resolve some of our budget issues with some of the ways that we build in the city? And it really, I am all about getting our budget as firm as it can be so that we can have the fun stuff, you know? I have to tell my kid all the time, okay, you can buy that toy, but you can't buy that other one if you buy the first one, you know? And these are toys. Thankfully, his basic needs are met. But we've all played that game with our household budget too. And I think it's something where I want our city to be solvent so that we can be vibrant. You know, we can do the fun stuff. I think our future's been looking up, but I definitely want to keep us on that trend.
Thank you, man, and thank you for your service to our community. How would you set aside your personal beliefs, positions, and alliances to work with all council members, city staff, and the community?
That's a great question, and I was really glad to hear it when in the audience. I think the biggest thing is that the community can never come after personal friendships amongst council or alliances or whatever you want to call it. I think we always have to look at what's best for the community. I think there's always a lot of data that helps us figure out what's the right solution. We have to listen to that. We can't be beholden to, sure, the data says we should paint this blue, but I really like purple, so we should paint it purple. We have to do what's right for the people that we serve. And I think part of that is also doing what's right for all of the people we serve, the majority of the people we serve, and not listening to special interests or the 10 people who showed up to a meeting when there's thousands that need to be considered when we're making a decision.
All right, time for open questions and follow-up for Commissioner Dodd. I see lots of furious note-taking, so we might wait a minute.
I've got a pretty good Will Arnett impression right now with my deep voice. So,
Councilmember McNeil?
Thank you, Mayor. The thing that we work on, we struggle with regionally, all communities regionally, and especially in King County, is affordable housing. And some of the things that you're doing on the Planning Commission, some of the things all cities are working on right now is different types of housing. What is in your opinion, what is your opinion on how municipalities can help create affordable housing, and what methods would they use to do that when we constantly see market rate values increasing and assessed values of our homes increasing? What can we do as a municipality to offset some of that?
I think being willing to take a calculated risk is important. I'm familiar with the Bothell Urban Project through Bothell United Methodist Church. Disclaimer, that is my church. Former Councilmember Agnew was talking about Vacation Bible School, and that's where I was this morning dropping James off. My son is also named James. But I think, they can't build it right now because of required parking. And I feel like we have to find a balance to let people do the projects that could make a difference and swing change in our community. So I think I don't want us to just say, all right, no more parking, because that's a nightmare, right? If people didn't riot, I can't even talk about it. But I think if we can take calculated risks when the benefit is there and we can show that it will come, I think that that's going to be important. So I think just being flexible. I feel like at times municipalities are rightfully concerned about litigation or backlash, and I think just having the bravery to try and do things is so important, and I feel like it's the first thing that goes when things are tough too. So I would love to see that more in Bothell.
Amanda, I'd love to hear you speak a little more about what your vision for diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts should be in the city.
Yeah, I think part of letting go of, as Councilmember McNeil's question asked earlier, letting go of personal divisions and making sure that we remember that we represent all of Bothell is just attending the cultural events and talking to our neighbors and learning from people. I think the best part of Bothell right now is that we're celebrating a lot of holidays that aren't part of my religion or aren't part of my culture, and we're learning so much. My child is learning so much. We're talking to our neighbors who come from completely different backgrounds. We have so many new people in our city that didn't grow up here to talk to now. And it's amazing. Like, I think getting all of council out to these events, promoting them, helps get our citizens out there and talking to each other. I saw a lot of the same people at the Pride flag raising and the Juneteenth flag raising in June. And I would have loved to see the whole council there, just to learn about our neighbors. These are people telling deeply personal stories, and they deserve to be heard. I feel like it's easy to kind of exist in your bubble. I go to the same Starbucks all the time, but when I get the chance to swing by independent stands, or even just a different coffee place for a different experience, it's amazing. And that's a very small example. I just drink a lot of coffee, so that was the first thing I thought of. But I think we need to set the example as a council of just reaching out and being at different events and showing up for each other, so that we learn more about each other. Because I'm not changing my beliefs or my religion, but knowing more about someone else is only going to help me communicate with them and work with them and represent them.
Any other questions for Commissioner Dodd? Thank you, Commissioner Dodd.
Thank you very much, you guys.
Thank you for your time.
And I didn't lose my voice.
All right, next up we have Andy Rayam. Mr. Rayam? Welcome.
Tricky. Thank you. This place seems smaller than I remembered it 2.5 years ago, but.
Well, thanks for coming tonight. Thank you for your time. You've got 5 minutes to tell us about why you want to be on council.
That's a good question. I've served the city for 8 years on this council, 4 as the mayor, 4 as a council member, and I did planning commission as well. I think when you've done something like that for that long, it's literally like your child. I care a lot about this city, its staff, the council, what we do as a community. My imprint is on this city, better for worse, and I care a lot about what happens to it. So that's why I applied. I felt like you guys could use some experience on this council added to for the next 1.5 years to get you guys going with some. I think there's 3 of you that have less than a year's experience, and so it'd be good to just have some people to choose from when you're appointing somebody to have experience. And really can bring that history to the dais.
All right, Councilmember Zorns?
Okay. My question has nothing to do with things that you addressed many, many, many times. So tell us about your budget priorities and what that looks like.
Sure. I think the important part, especially this day and age with the cities the age they are, we need to take care of what we have. A lot of things are aging. If you don't start planning for your infrastructure and it just breaks, you're going to pay a lot more for it. So it's important. You can see the roads in our city. We did pass a levy some years ago, but it wasn't enough. There's easily $50+ million of road work that needs to be done. That's just the road. You got water, sewer, storm. You've got buildings. So luckily we have this new building, but you have a lot of other buildings. The fire departments were fixing those 2 stations, but there's more to be done. Senior Center almost got shut down until Councilmember McNeil stepped in there and passed a levy actually to keep it operating. I think an example of when that could go bad is in Redmond. They had their city senior center, the wall fell off. And at that point, it was uninhabitable. So yeah, taking care of what you have. The other things are really look at economic development opportunities, look at making sure you charge for services. The days of cities doing things for free are behind us. We don't want to call the fire station and they ask for your credit card to come out with the fire truck. Those types of things need to remain free. But other things, we need to be careful and thoughtful about what we do with the city resources and how we generate funds. The other ones are public safety. I'd already touched on infrastructure, but public safety is the cornerstone of what you guys do. So that is an important piece of the pie. I have a lifetime public works employee, so it's hard for me to stomach that statement, but it's true. You really need, if you don't have police and fire, the other things don't matter. So.
Thank you. Councilmember Aldrichs.
Thank you, Mayor. Next question is, what do you think local government can do that can most successfully mitigate climate change?
There's a few things. Building code obviously is one of them. You can make requirements so that things are more less impactful on the environment. Another one is your fleet. You run a fleet. I don't know how many vehicles we have now, but I'm looking over there. My old habit. There's a lot of fleet that you could green. There's things you can do that retrofit with a propane tank. For propane fueling, you can buy electric vehicles. You can have charging stations. There's that piece. And then the other one I think is really in your wheelhouse is stormwater and stream restoration. So as the climate is warmed, we've had some species that rely on other species, like the orcas, for example. We can take a significant role in creating salmon habitat, fish habitat that feed the food chain to keep the species alive as the climate changes. And then working regionally, obviously, is usually a cornerstone of, we can't change the world just here in little old Bothell, but we should certainly put a dent if we work regionally.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Unfortunately, the last election cycle included unfounded attacks on some of the members of this current council and characterization of many Bothell residents as being racist, anti-police, and extremists. Against this kind of divisiveness, what specific actions would you take as a council member to promote unity, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and ensure that all Bothell residents feel welcomed in our city, regardless of racial or religious background?
Well, Deputy Mayor, I heard Councilmember McNeil's request to change some questions, and I knew exactly what he was talking about when I heard your question. I think your question is inappropriate. So I'm going to skip over the first half of it, and I'm going to go to the second half and tell you what I did. When I was councilman, I think it was the mayor, President Trump became president, and he stopped all flights from Islamic countries, Islamic nations. So you can imagine the Islamic Center of Bothell was a bit upset about that. They called us, and we spent many nights, the police chief and I, with them. So that's how you do it. In the Hindu center or Hindu temple, it's not in Bothell, but a lot of our people go, our residents go there. They got vandalized. We did the same thing. So as a city, I think it's important that you stand with every single member of this community, especially in their time of need. But you can do it otherwise, but it just seems there's time and again, there's issues that come up and things that happen, and that's where the city should step in and show people that they support them here, just like anybody else.
All right, next up, my question is two parts. Similar to many cities in the region, we have a structural budget deficit and a dramatic shortage of housing. How do you see these two issues as related, and what policies would you support to help break that cycle and bring budget sustainability and more housing to Bothell so children who live here now can afford to stay when they grow up?
So I think it was Tom Agnew, he mentioned it. So when Tim Hyman passed his initiative and made it so you can only raise the taxes by 1% on what you raised last year, that's a problem because it causes a deficit gap. And the cities have every city around here is in the same situation like the mayor mentioned. Bothell's never bounced a check. It's going to be okay. We always work our way through every 2 years, a balanced budget. There's things you can do. There's revenues you can bring in. Like I said, that don't give things away for free. This is a business. This isn't a giveaway for free corporation. So I'd focus on those things. I'd also focus on making sure you don't expand the government. And I think I'll go into a little more detail on that in a further question that you guys are going to ask. I think it's important that you be mindful that you are constrained heavily by the ability for you guys to raise revenues and the affordability too. You got to keep that in mind. You can't just, if the state's that you can just charge whatever you want. You don't want to just go out there and make it even more unaffordable here. The second part of your question is about affordable housing. I think that's a regional issue that has, at a snail pace, been worked on regionally. But you can still find affordable housing. I have a friend that just bought a condo, maybe a year ago, and they have about $40,000 in equity already. So there are opportunities out there still. Are you going to have tons of opportunities for people? No, it's just the way it is here right now. We're not the first place that's done this. San Francisco is unreal. I've heard it's been like that for 15 years. I'd look over there. How are they housing how do they find housing for everybody there? Places like that where it's not a new thing. It happens. It's the progression of, a really nice place where people want to live. It becomes expensive. And so that tide will turn. It's just a matter of time. But yeah, working regionally is the only way really to get at that. We can't just do it here and think that we solved something because it won't solve anything.
Councilmember McNeil. Oh, Mankey. Sorry.
What do you believe to be the role of municipal government, and how do you plan to balance wants versus needs given a limited budget?
So that was the question I was waiting for to get into the details. So you really only have a certain amount of departments, and that's on purpose. You have a police department, a fire department, public works department, parks department. If it doesn't make sense to fit a service in those things, it's okay to expand your services. But if it doesn't fit in those departments, I wouldn't even. But there's other places that could provide that service. There's other local governments that are out there. We're in a hospital district, for example. I always think, I totally support the radar program, but I also chuckle a little bit thinking about police providing psychological support to people. We have a hospital district. I don't know why they wouldn't be the place where we would ask to provide that service. They have a taxing authority. So, I'm sorry, the second part of your question, can I ask for clarifications?
Sure. It's similar to some of the others I've asked, but how do you prioritize the wants and needs in a budget given the limited availability of funds and the things we have to keep the lights on for, and then whatever comes left over? How do you allocate those funds to the most important things? How would you determine what the most important things are?
Well, it's been my experience. We look at the services we provide now, make sure that we can continue to afford those and balance a biannual budget. I have yet to see the city get past that and say, like, let's expand something. That just hasn't happened since I've been paying attention to the city of Bothell. So yeah, it's just you start with what you're doing now. Does it make sense? Are you collecting the right revenues for those services? And then move on from there if you have more to work with, but I don't think you do.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your service to the community. My question is, how would you set aside your personal beliefs, positions, and alliances to work with all council members, city staff, and the entire community of Bothell?
And I think that's the trick, right? When you're on council, I keep harking back, but I think what I did probably speaks to better than what I would say I would do in the future. I treated every council member equally. I gave everybody equal time. I tried to follow the rules to a T just for the sake of making sure I kept the group together as a council member and as the mayor. I think that's important. I think it's important to have open dialogue. We argued, but at the end of the day, you just move on. You just, the council decided a decision as a body. You're not an individual anymore. You're a member of 7-person council. Like it's just not about you anymore. So yeah, you have to drop all of those things. You grow some skin too. I mean, there's always people that are happy with decisions you make, and there's going to be people that are not happy with decisions you make, and you just got to follow your heart. I always told all you guys that this thing will end someday, and the decisions you make will matter to you more than anybody, because you're going to have to live with it the rest of your life. So that's how I'd operate.
All right, that's the end of our scripted questions. Does anybody have any follow-up questions for Mr. Rayam? Councilmember Zorns.
I was going to put you on the spot, and I'm thinking better of it. But I watched you from your first days even before you came on city council. And a lot has gone through Bothell. And I know you've been concerned about history repeating itself here in Bothell. So instead of putting you on the spot and making you speak to it, I want to thank you for the service that you gave Bothell and gave us a good footing.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. My question is, if you were to come back to council, what would be your position on the things that we could do working together regionally with other partners to solve issues like homelessness, affordable housing? What do you see our role as a council in working together regionally, and how could we do that?
What's the old saying? If you're not at the table, you might be on the menu. So it's important to work regionally on all the regional issues. We can do what we want here in Bothell, but the real game is at the regional level. That's why you get funding that will come back to your city. If you ever looked at your taxes, the county takes a big chunk of your money. The only way to get that back is to work regionally on those committees: transportation, affordable housing, homelessness. If we have those issues, we need to. It's the best place to do it, other than just raising more taxes here. You can leverage your relationships you build throughout the region, and it takes a lot of time. I think Councilmember McNeil picked up that torch 6 years ago, and ran with it. And we have a name in Bothell, and we're definitely not on the menu because of a lot of the stuff that he did. I mean, we'd almost make fun of him because it was like, really, you want 13 regional committees? Like that's a lot. But anyhow, so yeah, working regionally is a critical piece of the role of the council. I worked regionally on boards, chaired boards. I was just specifically keen to and interested in salmon recovery, so I definitely was part of that. And the Sound Cities Association was another really good place to get a good footing in with regional partners. So.
Thank you. I did have one follow-up question on the budgeting process. How many budget processes did you go through? And can you give us some feedback on going through a current budget process after coming not out of a pandemic now, but some of the things that we see are going to be coming, some big issues coming before us here in the next year as we set our new budget.
So we did pass financial policies, and I would recommend each of you. I mean, it's a solid read right before bed, but it's really important for you guys to understand what's been passed. You can change those. Probably not a good idea. They're probably staff are working with those policies now. They have been for months, and so they're going to bring you a balanced budget. And so looking at those and then looking at what you receive from the staff. I know you don't have a chief financial officer. You do have a good deputy that's in there, though, that's been here a long time. So she should be able to bring you a balanced budget and options for your budget. You know, you have like the core services of stuff, and you can pick around that a little bit maybe. We never were very successful, but it's the rest of it. It's like 3% of your budget you really have an influence or ability to really change. So I would focus on that. I would definitely try to listen to the staff. You have an exceptional directors team. At least I think you do. It's changed over a little bit. I haven't met the new city manager yet, but I'm sure he's a good guy. I've heard good things about him anyways. So yeah, I would definitely listen to them. Think about your options. Like I said, I think, and it's been hard for me too. I've worked in municipal government for a long time. It's nice to be able to help people that are in need, but at the same time, you're literally giving them other people's money if you're just giving them services. And so you got to really think about that. You got to think about like, well, is that the best use of that money that's been basically given to you? The responsibility is yours to spend it properly. So.
All right, thank you for your time.
Yeah.
All right, next up we have Carrie Westerbeck. Batting cleanup today.
What's that?
Batting cleanup today.
Oh, yeah, that's
You're
right.
the last one.
Correct.
All right, Commissioner Westerbeck, you probably have a good feel on the process at this point in time.
Starting to, yeah.
Certainly better than I did at the beginning of the meeting.
Thanks for having me.
But you've got 5 minutes to tell us why you want to be on council, what you think you'd bring.
Sure. So my name's Carrie Westerbeck. I live here in downtown Bothell. Been here since 2015, but I also lived in Bothell 2 other periods of my life, so I keep coming back. And it was always my wife's and my goal to come back. Actually, I live in downtown Bothell because we loved it when we first were married in our mid-90s and lived here at that time. I've also lived in Kenmore, and I was raised in Woodinville, and I went to North Shore schools my whole life. I'm a local architect, a small developer, occasional contractor. And I've served several years, 3 years on the Landmarks Board here in Bothell. I was including chair for 2 years. I'm currently on the Planning Commission, as many of you know. Thank you. Some of you helped make that happen. I was also PTA president over at Arrowhead in Kenmore. I've been pretty involved in city activities and civic activities since I've been here in 2015. I know a lot of city staff because as an architect and developer, I work closely with community development. And then again, after hours with Planning Commission. I was also a watershed planner for the city of Seattle for several years in a previous life. And I watch pretty closely the city council meetings and the budget, creating the budget every 2 years and keep a close eye on what we're doing as a city because I care about Bothell a lot. That's one of the reasons I live downtown. I'm a big fan of creating community, building community, being part of making this a really attractive place to live and where more people can come and live if they would like. Another thing, I actually serve on the Development Services Advisory Group. That was one of the first groups I started working with here, where we convene quarterly to work with community development on new policies they're trying out. I also formed a group called BOPOP, Bothell for People-Oriented Places, in 2019, and we're about advocating for housing choice, safer streets, resilient and economically strong downtown, small business opportunities. We adhere to a lot of ideas that Strong Towns nonprofit policies, or I should say it's a media company, but that they advocate. And I'm married to a 29-year North Shore School District teacher as well. So, yay teachers, right? Right, Commissioner Zorns? So that's a little bit about me. given this diverse background and my nerding out on city policy for a long time, I've considered running in the past and always been a little too busy to do so. So I thought this might be a good opportunity to serve if I was chosen. Feel like I've got a very good background for getting up to speed quickly if I were to be chosen.
Thank you, Commissioner Westerbeck. Councilmember Zorns?
I feel like we should do a drum roll for our, our last interview here. Okay, tell us about your budget priorities and what that looks like.
Sure. Yeah. Well, this might come up a couple times, but I do believe it's important to have a strong police and fire. I've had actually some great interactions with both. In 2018, I actually wrote the language, the voter pamphlet language for the Proposition 1 levy, and I met twice with the police and fire chiefs and had great conversations with them about how to write that and crafted it. We must have done 17 revisions. So that was fun because that was passed, and so we're all benefiting from that now. That's really important. And then one of the things I think that is extremely important, and I heard elsewhere, was maintenance, that we should be maintaining what we have really well so we can keep it around longer. So doing all the things we do, community development, police, fire, parks, et cetera, maintaining what we have, and using our limited budget to do those well. And then also not neglecting and starting to jump into looking at what little things can we do that are close to the ground with little pots of money here and there that immediately help people, worn out crosswalks and things like that. It might, again, tie into maintenance, but those things that affect people every day, if we walk in their shoes for a mile or two and see how they might be affected by a difficult street crossing or a jammed up sewer line or something like that. So really doing the solid basic things really well and wringing the most out of each dollar.
Thank you for being here. Next question is, what do you think local government can do that can most successfully mitigate climate change?
This is near and dear to me. It's part of my kind of advocacy work, but also part of my profession. There's enormous amounts of evidence now showing that the most important thing we can do is get people living closer to each other in a community like you might see in some other countries, European, South American, Middle Eastern, Asian countries where people live in community together. They can walk more, they can bike more, they drive less. There's quite a bit of data now showing a city like New York City, this is well known, has a much smaller climate footprint than a place like Bothell because they're driving a lot less. They live in even old buildings are more energy efficient because they share walls. It doesn't necessarily mean we. As an architect, I delve into this a lot. It's important to make our buildings more green and to insulate them and so forth. That goes a long way to save energy and thereby creating more energy availability. But the most important thing we can do is live more compactly and live closer to the things we need to do. The cool thing about that is you also get a pretty high quality of life.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. Unfortunately, the last election cycle included unfounded attacks on some of the members of the current council and characterization of many Bothell residents as being racist, anti-police, and extremists. Against this kind of divisiveness, what specific actions would you take as a council member to promote unity, diversity, equity, and inclusion to ensure that all Bothell residents feel welcomed in our city regardless of racial or religious background?
Great question. I've got kind of 2 points there. One is I'm someone who likes to be out in community, seeing people. I love the festivals we've had. I think Bothell's doing an amazing job of creating community events, recognizing the different religions, cultures, people who are coming to Bothell, making it home. So the Diwali Festival, I'm also a member of Bothell United Methodist Church, and they've been really proactive about interfaith activities, services, getting people together. I find that when I go to an event where I'm rubbing shoulders with people from all over the world who might have come here, local people I might not know, maybe I don't agree with them on everything, it humanizes us all. And travel, it's one of the things I love about travel is suddenly this person's just like me. We have similar concerns. We have similar families. We both have kids. We both have a job to do. And you realize they're a lot like me. They eat slightly different food and they've got different weather, but hey, we're so similar. So continuing with the community events and recognizing that we are a more diverse community than ever, recognizing that, celebrating it, creating events around it is key. And then getting us all out into the community together. The other is that I really encourage to see the DEI task force and the consultant that the city hired. And it seems like we need to scrub almost every single policy, every bit of municipal code for through an equity lens. I mean, I know our land use code, for example. All land use codes in the United States are based on a lot of specious ideas, and they're tied to racism or ways we could get around or classism because they couldn't be racist anymore after certain decisions in the early 20th century. So we really need to take a hard, detailed look at what we have in our codes, in our laws, and our policies, and which I understand DEI task force is doing. It's a big job, but where are we going to find those little ugly nuggets and root them out and start to deal with them?
All right. Similar to many cities in the region, we have a structural budget deficit and a dramatic shortage of housing. How do you see those two issues as related, and what policies would you support to help break that cycle and bring budget sustainability along with more housing to Bothell so children who live here now can afford to stay when they grow up?
Well, this is a big part of my advocacy and something near and dear to me. We actually have an enormous amount of buildable land in Bothell that's not called buildable right now. We do not use our land efficiently in most of the United States, except maybe in the cities. We really need to, if we're serious about housing people, we need to house people, not worry so much about the parking, although we're going to transition period there. And we need to be allowing people to use a lot more of their property, whether it's downtown here or out in the outskirts. And we also need to be looking at how to encourage people to build where we already have roads, pipes, wires, sidewalks, and infrastructure. And every time we're given a new cul-de-sac or something, we're responsible for paying for it. And that just is a bill that is going to come due when we have to rebuild that. So focusing on, again, how can we make the most amazing community here? We're going to see a lot of this information coming from Urban 3 telling us this is the way forward. It'll actually bring in a lot more money for the city too if we create wonderful community, wonderful places, wonderful parks, encourage developers and to raise their game. But we also have to couple that with community development, completely re-looking at our land use code and looking at how we can allow people, release people who build housing, stop vilifying them and saying, please help us. We can't do this all ourselves. And we have a scarcity problem with housing. And we can both build more and get revenues from that. So that's a two-prong. And the places they are doing that, places like Montreal, places in other countries, but also places in the United States, they start to tackle the scarcity issue. Build more housing, allow anybody to build it, relax some of the zoning codes, and let people use more of their property. A lot of our exclusionary zoned single-family home areas, you can only use 30 to 50% of your lot. Why are we telling people they can only use half their lot? I mean, there's stormwater and stuff to deal with, but we have ways of engineering that. Great cities across the world have done that. The cool thing is, you do that, you free people up to help the city with their own problem. We also get a lot more money, and we create an amazing community. And we also encourage mixed uses, so people have a corner store again, and they can go to the nail and the salon place on the corner and down the street, and they can go to their accountant and things like that right in their own neighborhood. And you know what? That's how our great-grandparents and their grandparents lived. I don't want to do anything radical. I just want to take us back to how we built things in 1900. This is not crazy stuff. Your grandparents would recognize my vision for bringing us more money and bringing us more housing. They go hand in hand.
Thank you. Councilmember Mankey?
What do you believe to be the role of municipal government, and how do you plan to balance wants versus need given a limited budget?
Great question. Again, kind of calling on an earlier answer, I really think it's important cities maintain things first. We should maybe focus less on huge capital projects and big endeavors that give us state or federal grants, and focus on public safety, at least keeping that at the quality we have right now, because it's great. Keeping community development humming along so they can allow us to do that development that we need to keep people housed and allow the prices to come down a little bit in time. But focus on the fundamentals, focus on maintenance and making sure that everything's humming along. That, to me, is the central role of the city and the government. Just as I think Ms. Broadwell said earlier, Bothell seems to do that pretty well. Something I'm proud of. I think that we have really good city services, and I know that it's really tough to balance the budget every 2 years to make sure those keep going. That's, to me, the nuts and bolts, and then the rest of it's kind of gravy. It's nice if you can do the rest, but I understand from the last applicant that we often don't have enough for the extras, but if we did, perhaps if we do look at reforming land use codes, we'll have a little more money to pay our bills in the future, and we can look at splash pads and pump tracks and skate parks and stuff. But until then, we really have to keep the pipes patched and the potholes filled, and so the basics. I think that's critical. People expect that as a baseline.
Councilmember McNeil.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for your service to the community of Bothell. My question is how would you set aside your personal beliefs, positions, and alliances to work with all council members, city staff, and all of the community?
I love this one because I've been an architect for almost 20 years, and there's always this, I think you're in the building profession as well, Mr. McNeil, and there's this assumed adversarial relationship between architects and builders, and I don't accept that, and I've never accepted it from day one. I see the city like my client, and the general contractor and I are like city staff and the council member, something like that. I go and I have a meeting on the first day and say, we're going to get along well, and we're going to make an amazing project for the client because that's what we're both here for. And we need to see eye to eye, and I'm going to listen to your solutions, and I hope you'll listen to mine. So I bring that to every single project in my professional life, and it's really served me well. I like people. I like, for my profession, for example, I love site visits and stuff. I like to see things built, but I also love to talk to everyone building. And so I have had very few sort of, if hardly any, difficult times in my profession because that's the spirit I bring to my job. So I would bring that to council as well, that there is going to be overlap, even with people I probably have differences with, just as we see at the state and the federal level. There's always going to be something we can work on together. There's going to be an angle or facet to something that you feel strongly about, that I can find the facet or the angle that I feel matches that, and we can mesh and we can move forward. It's a compromise, and I'm pretty good at it. I would never have succeeded in building things if I didn't learn how to get along with all different kinds of people. And I know that there are lots of people I worked with who probably, we wouldn't go out and hang out, but we get things done, and we get things done well. And I've got a lot of satisfied clients because of that approach.
All right, that's the end of our scripted questions. Does anybody have any other questions for Commissioner Westerbeck? Councilmember Zorns?
Okay. I don't want to put you on the spot.
Go for it.
But I'm going to do it. So, I get the impression that you're not terribly fond of NIMBYs.
Yeah, I try not to use that because it's divisive. But I think that often we can do so much more than we do, and that we're being held back from real solutions. Yes.
Okay. So my question is, what's the good and the bad of a NIMBY mindset?
Good and the bad. Because of the good, everybody who likes where they are, where they live, their community, they're passionate about it. I think there's some of that in all of us, and I admire that. Where it comes from is a place of caring about your neighbors, about your neighborhood. There's a lot of beautiful neighborhoods that people don't want to change. I totally get that. And in fact, I don't want to go in and destroy those. Far from it. But say an old person says, my family's gone and I've got this enormous house I'm rattling around. I don't see why we wouldn't be able to allow them to divide it up. For example, when people push back against that and they say, no, there's no way, we're not going to allow that. That's part of the bad part. Why not? We need to house people. They're willing to do it. This should be a personal liberty and a choice thing. It's very conservative, in fact. So people should get behind that. So there are two sides of that coin. I mean, I think we've all probably got some NIMBY in us, even me. But we should be selective. So that's good. That's the good thing about it, absolutely. But it's gotten to the point where it's truly problematic because we can't move forward as a culture. We can't house people when houses are $1 million in Bothell. Something's broken. We've stopped up the works entirely, and we need to start working outside the box. And if that means we need to start negotiating with people who say nothing ever happens here, we're not going to change, we're going to, I don't want any change. I bought into this neighborhood 30 years ago, and it's not supposed to change. There's literally no city or civilization on Earth that doesn't change and evolve. So we need to kind of embrace that and say, okay, we've got to accommodate some more people. How can we make that an advantage? Can we get that corner store we want? Can my granddaughter buy a house or a condo or something down the street? Like, how can we spin this so that we get something great for the community while also solving a problem?
I appreciate your comment that everybody has a little bit of NIMBY, and the important thing is to listen to what that is.
Yeah,
right?
I think that Ms. Rodwell said that earlier, that you've got to listen. And I try and make that part of my advocacy work because everybody comes from a place of passion and care about the issue that they're there to talk about.
Yeah, as just an aside, and I'll keep it real brief.
Sure.
You were talking about what our grandparents had.
Yeah.
And they had that, and I enjoyed. They lived in Southern California, and I heard stories, and they told me about when cars started becoming plentiful, trolley tracks started disappearing, and accessibility for just hopping a trolley and going places went away. So
yeah, I wish we had those trolleys now. They'd be pretty handy.
Oh yeah, but there is something about yesteryear that's worth looking back at.
Yeah, we did what we knew as humans, and the interesting thing is it was sort of the same all over the world. It might have been adobe in some places and timber and brick in others, but we all sort of built the same sort of things. So it's fascinating to look at.
Well, thank you. We talk a lot about downtown Bothell.
Yes.
We don't often talk a lot about the Snohomish County portion of our city. But I know it's near and dear to all of us that sit up here on the dais. I've heard from all of us that it's important that we ensure that we're setting policies and making decisions that are affecting the northern part of our city the same as the southern part of our city. And when we talk about decisions that we make in downtown, how would you view and how can we work together to ensure that the decisions that we're making downtown are not having a negative effect on the community in the north end of our city? And how would we or should we make sure that we are not invoking perceived notions of what our community wants and ensure that we're listening to our community so that when we make those decisions, we're making on behalf of the community, not on behalf of our own personal beliefs?
Right. There's a lot there. First of all, the north end, I'm actually excited about the future of the Snohomish County in the northern half of Bothell. I was very involved as a resident, pre-planning commission, but I was on landmarks about the sub-area plan for Canyon Park. I was at most of the meetings. I think we should essentially have another entire kind of downtown up in Canyon Park because they deserve that. They deserve a place to go make community. They don't all want to come down here and drive down here and ride and walk and whatever we're going to do to get down here. And the best places I've been often have multiple little hubs. The city of Seattle's got a whole bunch of them. Wouldn't it be great if we had like a whole village up there? And then parks. I mean, we should. I talk about maintenance, but they're deficient up there. We haven't. They've gotten the short end of the stick. So I think focusing on up there, the northern end of Bothell is imperative. And again, I'll reference Urban 3. I think we're going to see them suggest that maybe up on Nike Hill, Canyon Park, there are opportunities for us to make little commercial nodes where we can create revenue for the city, housing, services for people up there who need them, maybe annexes for city services, things like that. That's, to me, the future of Bothell. I may need a reiteration, though, of the second part of the question, because there was a lot there about that you mentioned about the second half of your question.
Yeah, as an example, obviously, you know, the Wayne Golf Course, former Wayne Golf Course was near and dear to me.
Thank you.
And I was very passionate about that personally.
Yep.
But one of the things that I did was go out and get community support to ensure that we were doing something that the community wanted to have done.
Right.
And so as I sit up here, I try to legislate the same way on all the decisions that I make to understand what my community wants.
Right.
But I do have personal decision things that I want to do, but I try to take that out of the equation. And I just wanted to get your opinion on how you could potentially do that.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I do all the time in my advocacy work in Bothell is I'm always talking to people. In fact, I'm going to go meet with Brittany from the chamber. I think the mayor is going to join us over that to talk about how we can support more locations for small businesses in Bothell, all over Bothell. I say that because I have a small barbershop in my building that I built a few years ago. I had so many calls for that 550 square foot space. People were dying, not dying, it's hyperbole. There was so much demand for a small commercial space that was somewhat affordable. So I'm hearing that, I'm like, well, let's go talk to the chamber. Let's, how can that interface with the city so that, because what I'm hearing is that there are all kinds of entrepreneurs who can't open businesses here who want to. Talk about city coffers. I mean, that's tax and retail revenue we're missing out on. So I hear that all the time. I also hear about housing. So I really try hard to keep my ear to the ground on what the community and what the residents of Bothell want. I almost can't help it. It's like what I do. So that's just part of what I do in Bothell. And people who ride bikes and they say, oh, the North Creek Trail stops here and it's got routes and stuff. I've just always got my feelers out. So I would imagine that would only kick up more as a council member because people are coming to you, they're emailing you, they're calling you, meeting with you, saying, this is an issue, this is an issue, this is an issue. And will they always be near and dear, topics to me? No, but that's why you're appointed or you're elected to deal with the tough things, figure out how you can best serve the most people the best way. And it's not about me, it's not about any individual council member or their pet projects. And I see it, I guess because I'm a problem solver, trained and as a professional, I love to solve problems. So it doesn't have to be something that's my pet project. I hear someone say, gosh, we don't have enough money to do this or that, whatever. I start thinking, well, what kind of resources do we have to make that? Or how can we get that park in the north end or something like that? It just gets my wheels turning. I see it almost like a dare or a challenge. So that stuff always just fires my imagination.
We've got 3 minutes left if anybody else has any questions for Commissioner Westerbeck. I think we're going to give you 3 minutes back. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me.
All right, we are now going to adjourn to executive session. Well, adjourn is probably the wrong word. We are going to go to executive session pursuant to RCW 4230110-1H to evaluate the qualifications of candidates for appointment to elected office anticipated for start 30 minutes. Sound good? Cool. Action is then expected in open session. It is 8 o'clock even right now. We will be out from executive session at 8:30.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah?
can we take a 5-minute break?
Yes.
Before then?
Let's take a 5-minute break
35.
and do 8:35. Sounds good.
Thank you.
So we are going to take a 5-minute break, then go into executive session until 8:35. Is that good, Paul? Thank you.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
All right, welcome back, everybody. We're out of executive session, and I am going to turn it over to City Attorney Byrne, who's going to describe the process that we're going to go through next.
Thank you, Mayor Thompson. Incorrect password, that's great. So what we've done so far is had 5 interviews. The next process is that the mayor's going to open the floor for nominations to essentially advance the interviewees to a finalist. Those only take 1 nomination. There is not a second that's required. At some point, the mayor's then going to ask if there are any other nominations. If not, he will entertain a motion to close nominations, which does require a second, and then discussion, and then a vote. Once the council then has their final slate of candidates that they are considering for position 6, the council can either discuss those candidates publicly or not. But at whatever point that the council is ready to vote, as ascertained by the mayor by asking, is everyone ready to vote? Then the deputy city clerk will do a roll call vote by position number and ask which of those finalists you are voting for to be the replacement council member for position number 6. We will continue voting until that one candidate receives a majority of the votes of the remainder of council, which, because there are 6 of you, that majority would be 4.
Fantastic. Are we going to do this by position number or just open it for nominations?
For the nomination for finalists, it's open, whoever raises their hand first.
Councilmember Mankey.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to nominate Tom Agnew.
All right. Councilmember Aldrichs.
I would like to nominate Commissioner Dodd.
Deputy Mayor.
I'd like to nominate Commissioner Westerbeck.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to close nominations.
I'd like to nominate Andy Ram.
All right. Any other nominations? I will now entertain a motion to close nominations.
I move that we close the nominations.
I've got a second from the deputy mayor. And a roll call vote. Would anybody like to speak to the motion or the candidates? Councilmember Zorns.
I really think that Tom Agnew would be an
Point of order. This is a discussion on whether or not you want to close nominations. You do need a vote. You had a nomination, you had a motion and a second to close nominations. So the discussion is not on the candidates, it's on whether or not you want to close nominations. You would then have a vote, and then you can discuss the candidates.
All right. I'm going to assume that nobody wants to discuss closing the nominations, so I'm just going to ask for a roll call vote, please, clerk.
Okay, please say yes or no when I call your name. Councilmember Zorns?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
Yes.
Councilmember Aldrichs?
Yes.
Councilmember McNeil?
Yes.
Councilmember Mankey?
Yes.
And Deputy Mayor Alcabra?
Yes.
Passes 7-0. 6-0. Sorry.
And so now, within the 4 finalists that you have, now would be the time to discuss them.
Can I speak?
Go for it.
Thank you. Yeah, there was that little issue of voting. Thank you for catching that, Paul. For a year and some change, I would really think our council would benefit from Tom Agnew's presence here. He's not beholden to anyone. I voted with him on issues. I voted against him on some issues. He builds everyone up in a way that I've never witnessed anyone building up other people. I remember the last time that he ran, his opponent during debate, he said, look, Bothell's going to be in great shape whether you vote for me or you vote for my opponent. That's the kind of human being he is. And he's seen it all in the city. He knows our history. He knows budget backwards and forwards. So I really would like to see Tom have a presence in this dais.
Councilmember McNeil.
Thank you, Mayor. And I moved the applicant, Andy Ram, forward. I feel Andy, when I first got on council, Andy had a way of bringing us all together. We had a new council at that time, and we had a way of finding a way to work together on the issues that our city faced. And I've always found him to be balanced. I know there's been some things that have been said on social media, and I've witnessed those things personally. But I think that at this time, what we need is to have a person that can sit beside us, that can help us, guide us, that has the experience, that understands the budgets and the issues that we face within our community. So hopefully we can put aside some of the social media stuff that's been said out there and get to work on behalf of what the community is looking for, and that's for us to work together to set policies for our community.
Is it Councilmember Mankey?
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to speak also to my nomination. Mr. Agnew has lived a life of service to the country and to this community. Between his service in the military and 12 years on council, I think he has amassed a large number of, I would say, experience, and he's seen a lot of things, both in the community and in his service, that I think lend to this position. In his 12 years on council, he's also seen varying economic climates. He has helped and been involved in 12 budgets and has expert level knowledge on the fire service, which are two huge areas that this council will be looking at in the next year and a half that this position will be filling. So I think there's a lot of great things about all the candidates. I thought they were all very well qualified. I was very happy with the pool that we had, but I think above all, he stands out as the most qualified and the person I think that could step in during this time, given what we have in front of us and filling that role. So I will be voting for Tom Agnew.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. I nominated Mr. Westerbeck, Commissioner. We all saw the passion he has for moving us forward. I realize that we have two of the applicants who came in who had a lot of experience, but they decided to not be here anymore. And we do need to have fresh blood who have different views from the past, who need to progress us, move us forward, who have experience in building small, doing mixed use, doing all sorts of stuff in the future. People who are, the children of Bothell. I nominate Kerry because I believe that he has that ability to help us think about things that we have never thought of. I nominate. That's why I nominated Commissioner Westerbeck.
Councilmember Eldricks?
Thank you, Mayor. I nominated Commissioner Dodd because of her track record of being able to bring our community together. How she has been able to lead through some really difficult times. And my observation of Commissioner Dodd is that she's always willing to look out for the individual, for the family, for members of our community, to help them and to connect them with what they need so that they can thrive in our community. I think that is exactly what we need in a council member. I also very much appreciate that her service to our community on the Planning Commission means that she has been, not just in her extracurricular time, on addition to being, devoted mother and an employee, but also as a volunteer to our community and learning what needs to be done at the city level. I believe that one of the beauties of a participatory democracy is that there are so many voices and perspectives that are worthy and deserve to be heard. And it's really important for us to be able to continue bringing in new voices. I think that we need we need someone new on council, not somebody who has served before. I think we need somebody who can bring people together, who can stand for their beliefs in a way that is both gracious but also clear. And I very much would like to serve with Commissioner Dodd, and that is why I nominated her. Thank you.
You know, one thing that we haven't talked about in this process so far is that we are replacing Councilmember Dewar, who the voters have elected by wider margins, I think, than any of us. I could be wrong. If I've offended somebody, I'm sorry. And the voters voted for a composition of council that had somebody who thought a lot like Councilmember Dewar. And we have two deeply prepared and involved planning commissioners that I think are much more in line with her general ideas and the ways that she views the world. And I think keeping a council ideological composition that is similar to what Bothell has voted for is important. That's the community represented. That's the council they elected. You know, I like how the deputy mayor and Councilmember Aldrichs talked about moving Bothell forward. You know, we're not going to do that by selecting somebody that has already stepped down. We're going to do that by selecting somebody with fresh, new ideas that is serving Bothell right now. You know, they're not coming out of retirement. They're on the planning commission. They're deeply involved. They too will be able to step in right away because a lot of the land use things that we're working on, they're working on it right now. They'll be seeing it for the second time. So I'll be voting to move Bothell forward with one of them, and I really do think that honors the community that voted for this council. All right, Councilmember Aldrichs.
I apologize for speaking twice, but I also want to look at the composition of our community and recognize that we are a city in 2 counties, and that of the people that we interviewed tonight, one of them lives in Snohomish County. And I think that in order to recognize the importance of the residents in both of those counties, it would be wise for us as a body to represent somebody who lives in Snohomish County and to represent Bothell from both counties. Thank you.
Go for it, Deputy Mayor.
I was going to say, and Ben wouldn't be so lonely over here.
We could have your Canyon Park neighbors. All right, I am not seeing anybody else looking to speak. So I think we need to vote.
I believe item 4, the mayor shall poll council members to ascertain that council members are prepared to vote.
Council members, are you prepared to vote? All right, I see a lot of thumbs up nods. I think we're good.
And so next is the city clerk shall proceed with a roll call vote. And this is going to be done by position number.
Okay, City Attorney, I just want to make sure that I'm clear on the vote. I'm calling the names, and then the council members will individually state who they are voting for. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Zorns.
Tom Agnew.
Mayor Thompson.
Amanda Dodd.
Councilmember Aldrichs.
Commissioner Amanda Dodd.
Councilmember McNeil.
Tom Agnew.
Councilmember Mankey.
Tom Agnew.
And Deputy Mayor Alcabra.
Commissioner Amanda Dodd.
We have a tie, 3-3.
Item 6 indicates that elections will continue until a nominee receives a majority vote of the remaining members of council. Item 7, at any time during the election process, the city council may postpone elections until a date certain or regular meeting if a majority vote has not been received. And number 8, nothing in this policy shall prevent the city council from reconvening into executive session to further discuss the applicant candidate qualifications.
I would suggest, Councilmember Aldrichs?
If it would not be out of order, I'd like to make a motion that we move to executive session to continue discussion.
That would not be out of order, I don't believe.
Yeah, I don't know if you need a formal motion for that. It could be more of like, hey, do we want to go back in, and a quick raise of the hand?
Let's do that. You want to go back in? All right. Let's do 10 minutes. It's 8:52. We will come back out here at 9:02.
Recording stopped.
All right, welcome back from executive session. We went in to discuss the 3-3 vote, and we did not reach a conclusion tonight. It doesn't seem like anybody's looking to change their vote this evening. So I think now would be a good time to chat through kind of what it looks like and what we might recommend to the county council should they end up making this decision for us sometime in September. And I'll open the floor for discussion. Councilmember Zorns?
I just want to say, sending it to King County Council, let's just send the 2 names and have them, keep it simple for them.
Anybody have a problem with that? Works. Oh, Councilmember McNeil?
Yeah, I think that the process, going through this process, I think is something that as a council member, I don't think that we obviously don't go through this often, but I think that as I'm going through this process, I think we owe it to our community to at least take the time to hear one another out and to have an open discussion and potentially more than one discussion, potentially ask different questions. And I feel like having gone through this process right now, I feel like I still have questions that are unanswered. And as a council member that's representing the entire community of Bothell, I think that I'd like to have those questions answered. So I would like to take an opportunity to bring it back next week and have another discussion and see if we can't come to the conclusion on who is going to sit beside us and legislate with us instead of passing it off to King County. I would like that opportunity.
I mean, I'm not going to say no to that. Anybody else?
I'd be supportive of that as well.
I would like some further clarification from Councilmember McNeil about what he means about additional questions. And also, I would like to note that if we bring it back next week to council, then that does give the public an opportunity to review the events of tonight and to weigh in and give us their perspective on the 2 finalists that we have been able to come to.
I think we're going to put an executive session on for next week.
Okay, and separately from that, an open agenda item for further discussion on the council selection process.
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect. In that case, I believe the next thing on the agenda.
Can we do just?
Oh, it's a special meeting.
Can we just do a quick show of hands that everyone was okay with setting it to next week to discuss further, to give an opportunity? Okay, thank you.
All right. In that case, we're going to adjourn. Thank you all for your time tonight.
Can we have a quick council conversation?
That's right. Yes.
Because
I haven't hit the gavel yet,
Oh,
so
okay.
it's not official.
Phew. All right. I just want to say thank you to everyone who came out tonight. We had a fantastic slate. And I will say I kind of pushed to packing the dais if we could, because I would love to have everybody here at the dais who we talked to tonight. They all bring something really good for the city. And it was really hard to choose.
Anybody else? Oh, Councilmember Aldrichs.
To that point, I'm just really grateful that we live in a city that has so many opportunities for people to be involved in boards and commissions, and that 2 of the candidates that we heard from here tonight are currently serving on the Planning Commission, and that is they are to be commended for that. And so when people in our community want to be involved, I just really encourage them to find ways to be involved in our community. Look for opportunities to volunteer, to give feedback. And honestly, for me, when it comes to representing a diverse group of people, the more opportunities for engagement and participation, the better. So I'm grateful for the people who came out and interviewed tonight, and I look forward to continuing to work with them in any number of ways going forward.
Councilmember McNeil?
Thank you, and I'd echo those same comments as Councilmember Alders. I'd further like to go on and say that I do appreciate the candidates that have served for the city of Bothell. Previously, many elected officials serve, and they serve with grace and gratitude, and they're humble, and they're the humility that they serve with, and on behalf of their entire community, should be commended. And so I also want to give a shout out to those who have served before us, who have served with us, to ensure that we're looking at them in an equal opportunity, because for them to come back after having served for, in some cases, 12 years, to come back and want to still participate and still be part of the process, I think is important. And when we talk about ensuring that all voices are heard, those include the voices that came before us, with us, and will be after us. So I thank you for your comments, Councilmember Alders, and hopefully we can look at everybody equitably across our community for the services that they've provided us.
All right. I see no more little red lights or hands up. We're going to adjourn.